Thanks, Simon, for accepting my invitation and accepting to be on my show.
Yeah, it's great to be here. And I'm
So-
curious what will happen in the next few minutes.
So I've gone through your profile and I thought to tell about the work that you are doing to my audience.
Okay.
So can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Simon. I'm a software developer and architect. I'm working for close to 30 years in software development. And in the last 13 years, I'm a freelance developer. I'm working for customers in Switzerland mainly. And I'm doing Java software development with Spring Boot usually, with databases, microservice architectures, and I'm a Vaadin Community Award winner. So Vaadin is a UI framework for Java, and I'm using that a lot during the last 3 years now.
So from last 30 years, you have been a software developer and software architect.
Yes, exactly.
So how is that experience?
I really like that. So I started in 1995 as a COBOL programmer on IBM mainframe, so the very old technology. I was then working for Swiss Railways, and later on in the year 2000, I moved to Java, and there I had the chance also for Swiss Railways to start in brand new projects. So more than 20 years ago, most of the projects were greenfield projects. So we were building the first online ticketing solution for Swiss Railways. So I think we were one of the first railways in the world to provide online tickets. And later on, I moved to other projects also with Swiss Railways, and then I decided to start as a freelance developer to see other companies, to see other industries. And yes, that's what I like. I'm also a teacher, by the way, at the university. I'm teaching software development and architecture with Java at the university. So I have a lot to do, and I can share my knowledge there. That's also a great thing.
So you worked in different companies as a software developer, and you have done different types of projects for different companies and different industries.
Exactly. So I have a lot of experience with wholesale and retail. So e-commerce systems, for example, ERP systems, something that I really know by heart now. But there are also other industries like finance, or I was working for industries like machining, factories, and government, for example. So I have a broad variety of industries I'm already worked for in projects. And the projects are sometimes small, sometimes big, sometimes I'm working alone in a project, sometimes I'm in a big project team, so it's always different. So that's something that makes my job very interesting.
So you are from
I'm from Switzerland.
Switzerland. So you worked for Switzerland software projects, or
Yes, exactly. So
in this 30 years you worked only for Switzerland projects or for other countries software projects also?
I'm also working for Germany, project in Germany. I had a project in Belgium, and I also had a small project in the United States. But usually, most of my customers are from Switzerland. Yeah.
So, like you said, you worked for different sizes, companies with different sizes.
Yeah, exactly. So the smallest company that I'm working for has only 5 employees. So this is a very small company that I'm helping, and the biggest one is the Swiss government. So it's really different from how they work. So that's quite interesting, because bigger companies are usually a bit slower in deciding. So that makes sometimes working projects a bit harder. Whereas small companies are very fast, but you have to look that they really also work on concepts, not only doing and then they running in the wrong direction. So it's a bit more to coach them or to show them how to efficiently work on projects and not to lose anything during going fast. So all companies are different, but I prefer to work for smaller companies. It's, in my opinion, a faster paced environment, and I prefer that in contrast to big companies.
So what excites you to do the software development?
Currently, I'm working for a company that is building an ERP product. So they're selling an ERP product where you can, where also there's an e-commerce part. So you have a web shop that they provide to their customers. So it's a product they sell for small and medium businesses in Switzerland and in Germany. And currently we are modernizing this product. So the product is very old. It's 35 years old already. And but they constantly working on modernizing the application. And currently we're building a new web front end for the ERP system and also for the web shop to provide a new look and feel to make it accessible for all the customers, no matter what client they have. And that's a very challenging project that I'm currently working on.
So in these 30 years, you saw the evolution of software development.
Yes, I think in these 30 years I was working now in software development, a lot of things changed. When I started in 1995, software development was very small. So there were not a lot of people in the software development department. There were not a lot of software service companies, and most of the development was in-house. The applications were much smaller. And I think after year 2000, especially, software became more important for all companies. And so the projects became much bigger and it was harder to manage software projects. The software projects became more expensive, in my opinion, during that time, because also, for example, the requirements for the user interface is now much different than when I started, because when I started, you had just the black screen with the green text on it, and you could enter some text there. But now the UI must be very rich, and it must be usable by anyone. It should be usable on a mobile phone or on a computer, and this makes the requirements harder for software development, and also the software makes it more expensive. That's what changed. On the other hand, we have different processes. So we are agile now. So we don't follow a plan, or we follow a plan, but we don't make an upfront plan and then we work based on the plan. We try to constantly change or improve the process and to get faster. And that's something that really changed. On the other hand, what also changed is the whole way how you run the software. So when I started, it was mainframe computers. So you just had one computer running all applications on it. That made it quite easy for operations because everything was there. Then we started with creating applications that were running on the client machines. And now we are in the cloud computing, and you have a variety of cloud providers to choose, like Microsoft, Google, or Amazon. And this makes it even harder because with this variety, you have to learn all the platforms. And I think we have now more special roles in a project. Some people that only care about operations, some people that care about the requirements, some people care about software development, others care about user experience design. And so we have I think it's more diverse. It's more interesting probably than 30 years ago, but it's more challenging than 30 years ago. So it's more complex on one side, but more interesting on the other side.
Which one you enjoy, software architecting or software development?
I think I prefer both. Or to say, I usually call myself as a programming architect. So that means, in my opinion, if you want to create software architecture or to design applications, you must know how to implement it. And to know or to stay up to date with software development, you have to do software development by your own. So you can't be, in my opinion, you can't be a full-time architect because otherwise you lose the information how software development works today. So you should have a mix of both. And I also think that if you look at the project, there shouldn't be one person that is responsible for the software architecture. Software architecture should be something that the team shares. So you have to have like all people should have the possibility to work on software architecture or help on design and decide how things should be done. And this gives like a better architecture because a lot of people are involved and everybody that is involved has to care about the architecture. So there's no blame from the software development to the architect because every developer is involved in software architecture as well.
So what are the challenges that you face working for different industries, software development?
There are a lot of challenges. One challenge often is that if you look at the project, usually there are some users that have to use the application at the end. But often these users are not involved. So the company tries to gather the requirements from the users with people like requirements engineers, business analysts, or other people that try to gather the requirements, find out how the process should work. But sometimes they lose a bit the contact with the end users. And so finally we have created a product that doesn't fit very well the requirements of the end users. You know what I mean? So there's like a gap between what people would need and what people that are gathering the requirements think that people need. So in my opinion, it would be the best if also the software developers could speak to the end users or to the people that will finally have to use the software. So that would make better software. So that's one of the challenges. The other challenge is to find these people, because usually if you look at the company and you have to create a new project or a new software, the people that know best how this should work are the people that have the most work. So they don't have the time to work in the project. So that's also another problem that we have. And one of the last big problems that we still have is testing. So, you know, a lot of software developers are doing unit testing or integration testing, but they miss to do end-to-end tests. So they don't test the UI, they just test your backend code, database access, for example, or the business logic, but they forget to test the thing that the user at the end sees. Because if you use a software and the UI doesn't work, then you can't use the software, even if the backend is very well tested. So that wouldn't help. So end-to-end test is something that is very important, but it's not cheap because it's very you have to do a lot of effort to test UI applications. Also, because they may run on a mobile device, or they may run in the web, or they may be a desktop application. So you have different types of UIs that you may have to test, but this would be the most valuable part in testing. So finding the bugs before the users find the bugs would be a great thing to have. But that's still a challenge because that's not easy to do and needs a lot of effort.
So what is the role of cost in software development?
The costs in software development, the problem is, and I can speak for Switzerland. Switzerland has very high salaries. So Switzerland is a very expensive country. And so software will become very expensive, And that's why a lot of companies in Switzerland are trying to offshore software development to other countries like Eastern Europe or India, for example, to lower the costs. But this often doesn't work. So there are special projects that work very well. So if the business case is easy to understand and the business case is the same in every country, you can lower the costs by hiring people from other countries where the cost structure are cheaper than in Switzerland. But if the project is very specific to Switzerland, then it's very hard sometimes to explain people from other countries how software works. That's one issue. The other issue that we have, if we try to work with people from other countries that don't speak German, for example, because Switzerland, most of the people are speaking German. We have 3 languages or 4 languages at the end, but where I live, we speak German. And often the end users don't speak English well enough to explain what they want to have to other people. So we need some kind of translation. And when we translate things, often that's not doesn't work very well. So that's often a problem that we face. But in the end, what software makes expensive is that often it's too complex. People have requirements, and sometimes you should think about the requirements or discuss the requirements and ask the people, do you really need that? Or can we do it in other way that it may be cheaper at the end? So reducing the requirements could be something that would lower the costs. But it depends on the company. If you have a small or medium business, you can go to the management and say, hey, if you do it that way, it will be cheaper. And they will agree because money is important for them. But if you're working for government or for big companies, often the costs are not that important. It doesn't mean that they do not look at the costs, but often they prefer the better solution or the solution with the more features for whatever reason, and don't look at the cost like small businesses would do.
So do you have any unexpected thing that happened in software development for any project? You don't need to mention the name and the details, but just an experience if you can tell my audience would know.
Yeah. Oh, in every project we have such situations. I was also working in a project that was stopped because we started gathering the requirements and suddenly they said, hey, we have to start developing. But we said, no, that's not possible because we don't know everything that we need to start. So they started with kind of a prototype. And after like a year, I would say, they first tried to roll out this kind of prototype. So it wasn't really a finished project. It was really just a prototype. And the users took the software and said, no, that doesn't work. That's not what we want to do or what we need. We want to stay with the old solution. So they had a solution already in place and they tried to replace it with the new solution. But the new solution didn't really cover all the requirements that the users needed. And so this project was stopped and I don't know, this is already a long time ago. I don't know if they really replaced the old solution now, but they stopped it. And we have other projects. For example, I was not involved in them, but in Switzerland we had a big project for the tax, and this was stopped because I think they couldn't agree on the customer side what they want to do, and so it wasn't really a software mostly it's not a software problem, So mostly it's an organizational problem or a problem or a conflict between different departments, for example, in a company that they can agree on a process, for example, that makes a project fail or makes a project stop. Usually it's not technical, usually it's organization.
So you're saying that it will be a problem with the human beings, but not with the system.
Yeah, that's mostly because, I would say, or I'm most of the time I'm working with business applications, so applications that either end users are using to enter some data or applications that are used in-house for in the back office or order management system, stuff like that. And there, the technical challenges are not so big. The challenges are to implement the processes like the user will have a benefit from it. So that makes the user's life easier, for example. And if this doesn't work, that's usually a people problem and not a technical problem.
Can you develop any software?
Sorry?
Can you develop any software?
Yes. I'm not into machine learning or stuff like that. So that's not my area of expertise. I'm more in business applications. I'm also not, blockchain is not my topic currently, but all the other application types I can develop if I like to, yes. I'm more a backend developer, so I'm not so into front end or front end like really good front end with UX design and tiles and stuff. That's not my business. I'm also not a designer, but other than that, I can develop literally every software. Yes.
So backend means you'll be very good in understanding the cloud services.
Yeah, exactly. Or implementing the business logic, doing the database access to write software that is, for example, asynchronous, so to decouple parts of the system. That's my area where I'm good in, yes.
So what is the scale of the businesses that you work for? And how is working for small and big?
I think the difference between small and big companies is also often how many users the software will have at the end. So if you're working for Amazon, for example, you have millions of users, right? So the architecture or the platform where the application runs is very different from if you're working for example, I'm working for a small railway company in Switzerland, and there we had to develop like online ticketing software, and there we had a few thousand users. But I also work for companies that develop software for 5 users. So very special applications that only need a handful of users at the end. And from the development of the software, it's more or less the same. It doesn't really matter so much, but the runtime platform plus the availability of the application will differ. So if you're implementing a software for an in-house, for a company that is used in-house, sometimes it's not very important if it runs all the time. So if it fails for like an hour or so, that's not a big problem because they do something else during that time. But if you're Amazon or another company that is selling products over a web shop, for example, and the web shop doesn't run, you lose money. So that's the big difference between the different application types. So it becomes even more special if you work for healthcare, for example, if you're doing software for hospitals, for example, the requirements on security and availability and the runtime platform that it never fails is much more important than for regular business applications where the user just have to enter some data. So this really depends on the industry, for example, on the number of users you have, on etc.
So you work for big businesses. So if a client changes its their requirement or their needs, uh, uh, so which who faces the challenge in the software development, front end or back end?
Both. The point is more if there are changing requirements, it depends how well the software is built. So a lot of, or many times the problem that companies have that their applications are um, maybe a bit old, but they are also not very well structured. So that's the problem that we currently have. If you want to migrate an old application to something new or to modernize it or add new requirements, often the software is so bad in the structure internally that it's very hard to add something or to remove something because no one knows if it fails after that. So often old applications also don't have any tests, and so it's very dangerous to change the application because you don't know if there are any side effects if you change anything. And if you have to change, and if the application is very well structured, you can add something in the front end or in the back end, and it should work. But if it's not very well structured, you may change something in the front end and you have to change the whole application to the back end because there is no structure in it, it's not modularized, and that makes it often very hard to change. And that's also something you asked before, what changed in the last 30 years. That's something that changed. When we started 30 years ago, I think the applications were quite well structured, but they grew and a lot of people came to the project and changed something. They left the project, other people came in, and at the end you have quite a mess inside the application because no one was really responsible for the application and everybody was adding or removing stuff. And that's one of the challenges that companies currently have, how to move from the old applications to like a new architecture or a more modular system.
30 years is very long time. So uh, is there anything that you didn't understood about software development?
Yes, there are a lot of areas where I have no idea. So I told you before, machine learning or VR, for example, virtual reality or blockchain. These are all fields that I have no idea how this works. But you know, sometimes you have to decide if, I mean, these fields also are interesting and I would love to work in these fields. But sometimes you have to decide what you want to do. So you have to focus on something because if you have tried to be too broad in the knowledge, you will never be an expert in any field. So you have to decide which field of software development you're interested in, and then you have to focus on that and become a senior developer in that field. So that's very helpful. It's very helpful to understand all the parts, all the different kind of software development, because this helps you understand concepts, for example, but you will never have a chance to be a master in all fields.
You're working in very expensive field that humans created. So, so you saw the evolution of software development and also the changes that is happening with the time. So, what is that thing that you observed that is constantly changing in software?
The problem is that people forget history. So usually you learn from history, right? So you go to school, university, everybody is trying to teach you history, that you don't make the same mistakes again. But in software development, it doesn't look like that people are looking at history. And because I'm doing that for a very long time, I see that concepts come and go and they repeat. So history repeats in software development. So if you look at young software developers fresh from the university, they make the same mistakes that we did a long time ago. Also, like every year, especially in the front end development, the tools are constantly changing. But the tools are often not better, but just different. So instead of making a tool better, you just invent a new one and use that. So that's one of the problems. On the other hand, people think that new architecture styles like microservices is something new. That's not fully correct. That's just part of the truth, because microservices or distributed systems we had 30 years ago. It's just another name. So often people create new stuff and give it a new name. But if you look at the concept, it's an old concept that was already there. So that's one of the problems in software development. If people would look more on the history, how things evolved, maybe they wouldn't make the same mistakes all the time. Yeah.
So if you have time, I have few more questions I can ask.
Yeah, sure. No problem. Go ahead.
Yeah. So how is your experience working with youngsters, young developers?
I like to work with young developers because that's very challenging for me. Because, you know, if you're working for a long time in a field and you think you know everything, you don't ask yourself questions. And if new developers come into a project, they will start to ask you questions. And sometimes questions you never thought about, and you have to think, oh, yes, they're right. Why do I do that like this? Maybe there's a better way. And so we can discuss. I really like to work with young developers. That's also why I'm teaching at the university, because I like to coach and teach people, and usually I learn a lot from teaching and coaching. And I have to be up to date always, because they ask things about frameworks or tools, and I have to be up to date with the newest technology to help them or to answer their questions.
So what do you understood about the user experience of the softwares that you worked for?
User experience is different from application to application, and also different from who is using the application. You know, so if you have applications that are used once a year, so like you have to fill in tax return or something like that, then it should be very self-explanatory. It should explain itself, the UI. So you don't have to look at the manual, or you don't have to ask someone how to use it. It should just work. But if you're developing applications for users that every day have to use this software, there's a different kind of user experience, you know, because they know how the software works. So there, the focus doesn't lie on the application should be easy usable, but the application should be usable as the users need to use it. It's a bit hard to understand, but there's slight difference in user experience. One is more, it should just work and it should be easy to use, and you don't have to think about how to use it. So that's for applications that are not used a lot. And if the user uses the applications a lot, it should just work, and it should be very fast to use. And that's maybe different. But what changed in the 30 years, now we have people that are caring about user experience, because 30 years ago, no one cared. You know, we just created applications, users used it, they told us it's okay or not okay. But now there are also studies that you can take on user experience. Psychology is very important in user experience. So that changed also in the last years.
So what are more changed like that? More things that changed.
Other things that also changed is that people now know what software is. 30 years ago, we didn't have internet, or there was internet, but most of the companies didn't have internet. I think I saw the internet first time 1997. So we had just one computer that was connected to the internet for the whole department, and you had a list, and you can write your name on the list. You had half an hour to go to the internet, and then the next one came. And so people didn't know what software is. A lot of people didn't have a computer back then. But now everybody has a computer or a mobile device or a tablet or something like that, so they're used to use software. And so that's maybe also one thing that now you can have a look at, like if you have to create a mobile application, you may have a look at the mobile applications you like. And then the people can tell you, this application is something that I like, that is easy to use, and you can try to adopt concepts from other applications. 30 years ago, there was no application to take as a template, for example. So you had to create it from scratch. And now you can also, if you look at web applications, you can choose design that fits best. And so there are a lot of examples, for example, for applications to look at.
So
So
you already, yeah, yeah, go on.
sorry, go ahead.
So you already have huge experience in software development. So with this experience, what will you say about future development, future software development?
That's a hard question because it's not predictable. I think what also changed is the idea of having applications mobile first. So if you create a customer-facing application, you should first think about how the user uses it with the mobile device, not how it uses it if you're sitting on a computer on the browser. So that's something that changed. And it depends maybe on the future how the devices will change. So if you will have still a mobile phone, or if you have some wearables or other ways, virtual reality may become a thing, or augmented reality become a thing. If you go to a store, for example, do you have some augmented reality that helps you finding stuff in the store or buying stuff or whatever you do? So that really depends on that. But I think what will change is more what will happen customer facing. I can't imagine that if you have in-house applications that users use that are working for the company, really will face a big change, because there you mainly the application is about processes, so about entering data or doing stuff with the application. This will stay, but probably customer facing there will be changes in next time.
So how many resources you have used for different software development?
How do you mean resources?
Uh, it can be cloud resources or
Yeah. That depends a bit, because in Switzerland we have different laws for data protection, and so a lot of companies don't use the public cloud because they don't want to save their data in other countries, for example, or outside the European Union. Often they do like a hybrid approach, so they have the data that has to be protected in-house in their data centers, and stuff that doesn't need to be protected, that this could be in the public cloud. But I think there's a shift from hosting applications in-house to the cloud also in Switzerland. It's a bit slower in my experience than, for example, in the United States, where everything runs in the public cloud. But the problem here is that the job of the operations people changed. So if you have also a smaller company, they may have some system administrators that can um, like operate the Linux server and install applications there. But now they have to understand how the cloud works. So they don't do the operations by their own, but they have to know how it works. And so there's a shift in this skill set of the operations people for my clients. And that's often not easy. But because they have the traditional mindset and now they have to move to something else, that's a bit special. But I use the public cloud usually in my projects. I also have small companies that are using the public cloud because it's simply less expensive at the end.
Do you have a desire to work for a particular software type?
No, no, I'm really open because the type of the software, in my opinion, is not so important if you have a project that runs a long time. I think that the most important is that you like the business. So if you like what the application or what the users do with the application, so then it's interesting. So if the business does not interest you, so if you don't like finance, for example, you shouldn't work for a bank. That's my opinion. So that's why I worked very long for a railway company because the railway is very diverse. It's very interesting for me, at least, and that makes the job interesting. So it's not just about software development; it's also about the business cases that you have to implement.
So usually it can be any industry that a software developer is working for. What is complicated in software development and what is challenging?
Um, it really depends because often understanding the business processes and what the people do is more challenging than to implementing the software. So depending on the industry, um, there are some industries where software is always the same. You know, that's also the industries where software products are used. So, for example, if you look at retail or wholesale, there are always the same processes. So you have kind of um, people that are purchasing the goods and then they are selling it on an e-commerce platform or in a store. And this is always the same business process, you know. And there you can buy a product and customize the product and use the product. Challenging is there where the industry is very different from others, or where the software can make a difference for them. Let's say if you take manufacturing, you have software that runs on the machines at the end, and so often the machine makes a lot of difference for the user how you can use that machine at the end. And this could be a very important selling point then to sell the machines. And there I think it's very challenging to create software that fits very well the machine. There are also no products because everything is unique from software development.
So this is something out of what you did before. So do you understand space technology?
No, I have no idea.
So just trying to understand because we have data centers on this planet and we are able to connect and communicate and do work here. So we humans decided to go above the planet and trying to communicate and connect and design infrastructure and software because you are a software developer as well as a software architect. So what do you think the future is going to be? Are we able to, as we as a human beings, are we able to achieve this and put software above the planet?
I think so, yes. The point is more, is this our real problem currently, or are there other problems that should be solved first? And how could software development help other problems to solve first? So I think we have a broad variety of problems to solve, and some problems are solved already in parts. Other problems are absolutely not solved. And even with software or without software, there is nothing that will be done there. And so it's hard to say. It also depends, like, there are a lot of different countries. They are completely developed differently sometimes. And the infrastructure of the countries are different. So maybe there is a lot of potential in solving problems, even with software, for countries that are not as developed as Switzerland, for example.
Do we have hardware devices with which we can do that?
I only can tell from Africa, for example. So they don't have any landlines. In Switzerland we have fiber. Already we have very fast internet. In other countries, like countries in Africa, for example, there are no landlines. They rely just on the mobile network. So like Elon Musk is doing with I don't know, space, no, not space. I don't know how it's called. So to have a mobile network all over. So that's something that we could do to reach all the people and to make people or give people access to the internet, for example, to software that they can use or that will be helpful in any way, or to have software running that will help to save energy, for example, or something like that. But for that, we need a network, and that's often not so easy to have access to the internet, even for some countries.
So at last, what do you say to the developers, young or intermediate level or experts who are watching and listening to you? What points that you want to say with the valuable, vast experience that you have?
Something that I already talked about, history. Have a look what people did in the last decades and how they solved the problem, and think about how you could learn from the past and how to look at concepts. And concepts are very important. So if you learn something in software development, learn the concepts, because the tools and frameworks are just an implementation usually of concepts. And if you understand concepts, it doesn't matter what programming language that you're using, what operating system you're using, what tools you're using, because if you understand the concepts, you can use everything.
So I'll put your web links in the description of this video. People who finds our video on YouTube can see the work that you are doing. And also you said that you are a freelancer. You can develop software for individuals and for small companies as well. People who wants to get their work done will connect with you and they'll solve their problems. And can I put this video on my YouTube channel with your permission?
Yes, sure, no problem.
Can I also put this audio and this video clip on my podcast, website, internet, social media, everywhere with your permission?
Absolutely, yes.
So at last, what is your observation about my work? Have you seen any videos of mine on YouTube?
Yeah, I really like it because you talk to so many people and from different professions, and it's very interesting to see what they're talking about, because I think that's unique. I've never seen a channel from someone who is talking to a lot of different people, and this is very interesting also for me. Yes, it's a great thing that you do.
So I did masters in software engineering and also bachelor's in computer science and engineering. And right now I'm a cloud DevOps engineer. So how talking with experts like you who already solve different problems, who work for different industries and who are sharing their experiences with me, what I'm going to learn from all you people and can serve to the organization if I work or if I work in coming days.
Yeah, that's
How
great.
this experience is going to helpful for me.
I think listening to people or listening to the experience from people is always very interesting. Often it's not directly adaptable, but it just gives an idea or it gives another point of view on things, and this is always very helpful. So to get other ideas, to see other opinions, for example, that's always very interesting.
It's valuable for me. So thank you, Saman, for your for giving me your valuable time and sharing your experiences and giving answers to some of my questions.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Keep doing what you love.
Yeah, you too. Bye bye.
Bye.